So let's think about something that is deep and demanding, that I hope you'll enjoy and find fundamental. It's something I heard from Rabbi Shapira, which is an insight into a challenging subject. And the question is, the subject is Chanukah, but the thing I'd like to look at is the problem of woman's beauty, womanly beauty. Chanukah is a time to think about that, as we try to explain. And I'd like to show you that the Torah has an extreme contradiction or apparent contradiction about the question of material beauty, physical beauty, and particularly a woman's beauty. Let me try to set up the contradiction and then suggest to you a way through this, which is something which touches on deep and fundamental elements in Torah thinking. First of all, I'm sure I don't have to tell you that Greece is the culture that gave us our notion of aesthetics. In the West today, all structures are Greek, and all notions of beauty today are built on Greek foundations. Right? If you're a student of the classics, you'll know when it comes to art and to sculpture, Greece taught that you need a beautiful mind and a beautiful body. The Greek games were played naked to demonstrate the beauty of the body. Beautiful mind had the greatest philosophy, incredibly powerful philosophy, so strong that it attracted most of the Jewish people, as you probably know. The Hellenists, the real battle was against the Hellenist Jews. The philosophy was powerful enough to attract some of the greatest rabbis of the time. Acher, for example, was a contemporary Rabbi Akiva. He was swayed by Greek philosophy. The Gemara says that when he stood in the Beis Medrash, Greek books used to fall from him. Very interesting. It says, "Hayu noshri mimenu." Nosher means to fall off. Rabbi Shapira pointed out, nosher is an interesting word. It means to fall off like leaves from a tree. It doesn't say noflim. Noflim means he would have had Greek books in the folds of his clothing and they would have fallen off. Nosher means to be plucked off like a leaf from a tree. They'd been growing on him. Not just that he had books that he was looking into, but nosher means they were part of him. Right? And he went off very seriously. A contemporary of Rabbi Akiva's, as great, in one way even greater than Rabbi Akiva, in one particular way, merited to go into the orchard of Kabbalistic knowledge, and was attracted by Greek philosophy as incredibly powerful, and it defines Western thought today. And one of the deep elements of Greece and its teaching was aesthetics, beauty. So what's the Torah attitude to this question? How do we address the Greek claim about a beautiful mind and a beautiful body? What's our take on that? So if you look carefully, you will notice, I don't think you can miss this, that the Torah posits an extreme paradox or contradiction when it comes to womanly beauty. First of all, the Torah many times emphasizes its women's great beauty. Sarah Imena, we've just been reading the Parshas now, but the great forefathers of the Jewish people, Sarah was exquisitely beautiful. The Gemara goes into raptures about her, that her beauty was an echo of Eve's beauty. All other women compared to her are compared to her as monkeys are compared to humans. Raptures about her exquisite beauty. And we know, of course, it's based in the Torah itself, that the Egyptians were ready to kill for her. So the Torah is positing her very great beauty. All the great, and if you tell me the Torah only makes a point of it because it's relevant, namely, she was abducted and Avraham Avinu had to try to protect her, protect himself. But by Rachel it says she was beautiful and there was no practical reason to tell us that. No reason at all. The Torah says she was beautiful. On the contrary, the next pasuk says Yaakov loved her, which is even more strange, because it sounds like an element of his love for her was dependent on her beauty. That's extremely problematic. So the first thing to understand is why the Torah emphasizes female beauty. That is seemingly a very strange thing to do. The Torah is a document of how to be in the world. It is a central document of spiritual teaching. I would think that the least relevant thing you could possibly think of is physical beauty. By the way, when I talk about the subject in the Beis Yaakov environment, the girls will look at me with pity and they shake their heads and they say, "Rabbi, you don't understand. The Torah is talking about spiritual beauty." That's completely wrong. That's completely wrong. And the reason we know it's wrong is that the Egyptians were ready to kill for Sarah. The Egyptians were not looking for Rebbetzin material. You understand? The Egyptians were as depraved as you could possibly get. Therefore, she must have been spiritually beautiful, but that's not the point at all. The Egyptians were ready to kill her husband to take her because of her ravishing beauty. And therefore, she must have been beautiful to the most lecherous and immoral eyes in the world. She must have been stunning from a physical point of view. Why does the Torah need to tell us that? and by all the great women in Torah. The Ramban says that Dinah was exquisitely beautiful. The only reason the Torah doesn't mention it explicitly is because she was abducted and molested. It led to a tragedy, so the Torah doesn't talk about it. But she was very beautiful. And there are other women in Torah that either the Psukim in Tanakh or the Gemara wax eloquent about their beauty. Rachav, for example, the woman who finally married Yeshua, the Gemara says things that are almost impossible to repeat in public. Her beauty was so extreme that if men even thought about her, they lost all control. Why is that important? Abigail was so beautiful, the Tanakh, when David HaMelech, when her skirt lifted and part of her leg was revealed, David HaMelech was able to travel 10 miles by the light of the beauty of her leg. She was luminescent with beauty. So, woman after woman in the Torah are described as having beauty. And that's, I think, extremely problematic. Why is it necessary to know? And every word in Torah is of essence. Torah is not setting the scene or giving you like a depiction of the environment or, like you read a novel and there's atmosphere. Every word in Torah is of essence, deeply essential. What is essential about a woman's external beauty? Even more difficult, there's one man in Torah who's described as beautiful as well. Who's that? Yosef. And there the Torah describes him with a sort of physical type of beauty in terms that are reserved for womanly beauty. It's bad enough that we need to have a point made about great woman's beauty. Why do we need to hear that Yosef as a man was extremely beautiful? A side question we won't have the time to deal with today. Why only him? What's unique about Yosef? But again, there's a problem here, and the problem is that the Torah is talking about womanly beauty, and that's problematic. That's very problematic. Furthermore, not only is it a challenge to understand why the Torah needs to tell us that the women were beautiful, the problem is the very same Torah tells us that beauty is problematic. By the way, there's one woman who's described as beautiful in a very, very problematic fashion, and that's Esther. You know that Purim and Chanukah go together, right? If you take the span of Jewish history, 6,000 years of history, if you make a map of Jewish history of 6,000 years, incidentally, if you look at the 6,000 years, the Gemara says the world will last for 6,000 years. The world as we know it, before the pre-Messianic era, and then 1,000 years of post-Messianic era, 6,000 years, we are here. 5, 7, 8, this is where we are now, right? Very, very close. The Ramban says each day of creation is a premonition of 1,000 years of history. So, 6 days of creation, 6,000 years, we are late Erev Shabbos. Our generation, right now, we are very close to the end of history. It's time to put in your Shabbos clothes, smell the cholent cooking. We have the beautiful hindsight of seeing all the prophetic predictions having come true in exquisite detail, except for the last pre-Messianic showdown that we still expected. But if you look at this span of 6,000 years, you go back 2,350 years, you get back to Purim and Chanukah. Purim and Chanukah are the transition from the revealed phase of history to the hidden phase of history, or as the Kabbalistic sources express it, Purim is the right leg and Chanukah the left leg. When you get to the legs, you're moving beyond the body. History moves from head to feet, and when you finally get to Purim and Chanukah, you move beyond the body, and the legs are no longer part of the body. That's why our generations are called Hester Panim, where Hashem hides himself in our generations. The legs are called Lebar Megufei, outside the body. The Arizal says when a woman's in labor giving birth, her legs are cold, she can't walk anymore, the legs are irrelevant. Where her body ends is where new life begins. The legs are completely extraneous. They're simply organs that take you where you need to go. They're not part of you. So those are the legs of history. And Purim is where the light begins to fade, and Chanukah it fades completely. After that we've seen nothing, no miracles and no prophecy. Hashem does not reveal himself at all. And Chanukah, by the way, also a woman began the revolt at Chanukah. Esther at Purim, and a woman called Yehudit at Chanukah time was the one who began the revolt against the Greeks. Two great women, no accident that, because the first phase is always male, and the final phase of birth is always female. But be that as it may, Esther is the woman who stands at the junction between the revealed phase of history and the hidden phase. And Esther, the Gemara has a debate about her beauty. A very interesting debate. Machlekas Hamarayim, was Esther beautiful or not? So one opinion in the Gemara, she was one of the 4 most beautiful women who ever lived. And the other opinion is she was not only not beautiful, she was problematic looking, she had a green face. Now you know, Rav Dessler taught us that in every argument in the Gemara, both sides are true. It's true in Halacha as well, but particularly in Ashkafa, in Machshava, both sides of an argument are both 2 different facets of the same beautiful jewel. Which means that both sides of the argument are bringing out a different facet of the subject. How do you apply that here? Was she beautiful or not? What is this argument? One opinion is she was exquisitely beautiful, one of the 4 most beautiful women ever lived. The other opinion is she was problematic looking. The Medrash Rabbi, by the way, says she was 75 years old at the time of the Purim story. 75 years old. You have to understand this Persian king. He sends his agents out into the Persian Empire to find himself the most eligible, incredibly beautiful, ravishing Persian virgins. The girls they brought in must have been unbelievable. And then they pickled them for 6 months in perfumes, as if you're a feminist, it's enough to drive you up the wall. But anyway, can you imagine the beauty of those Persian girls? And among them, they bring in a lady, 75 years old, married with a green face. I mean, what were they thinking? And she's the one the king chose. Hashem, there's one woman in Jewish history that needs beauty. The rest problematic for us to understand. But Esther needs beauty. She has to attract this Persian king in order to save the Jewish people. There's one woman in all of history you really need to give beauty. You give her a green face, 75 years old. I mean, what are you thinking? But our question is, what's the meaning of this machlekes? Was she exquisitely beautiful or problematic looking? She had a certain chut shel chesed, which means some sort of charm, and that led the king to choose her. But that is extremely challenging. So on the one hand, we have a problem. The problem is why the Torah is emphasizing womanly beauty with Esther's beauty as one particular facet of the problem. That's a serious challenge. On the other hand, we have also a very strong contradiction to this principle. Because the Torah that talks about womanly beauty tells us that beauty is problematic. The same Torah that praises its womanly beauty in this fashion is the same Torah that tells us that physical beauty is extremely problematic. What am I thinking of? Where does the Torah tell us that beauty is a problem? Sheker achein v'hevel hayofi. King Solomon, Shlomo Melech, who occupies a unique position in Torah, but nevertheless, what he writes is Torah. Even though his writings were debatable in the beginning whether they should be included in Tanakh, which part of Torah do they belong in? But they're included in our Bible, in Tanakh, and in those verses, King Solomon tells us that physical womanly beauty is problematic. Sheker achein, that charm is a lie, and hevel hayofi, that beauty is all vanity and emptiness. Now we have a serious problem. Not only is it unnecessary to tell us about womanly beauty, the same Torah tells us that womanly beauty is extremely problematic. Sheker and hevel. You know, in the religious world today, if you want to introduce a young woman to a young man with a proposal of marriage, you tell him all about her before he meets her. So you tell her all about the girl. At some point you have to tell him whether she's good looking or not. It's not frum to say that. So you say she's got lots of sheker and hevel. Then he understands that she's good looking. That's the religious way to talk about it. But the fact remains that physical beauty is called by the Torah itself sheker and hevel. Now you have Sarah Imenu, this great full mother of the Jewish people, exquisite in her beauty. The Torah goes to great lengths to describe it, and King Solomon comes and talks about it and tells you that beauty is lies and vanity. I think we have extreme contradiction here. Would you agree? I think this is very challenging. Ironically, we sing that to our wives on Friday night. Erev Shabbos, you stand there. No doubt she's looking beautiful, your wife. She's probably looking a little tired, but, no doubt she's looking her best. And you stand there and you say, darling, sheker achein, hevel hayofi. That's very interesting. But that's how we look at a woman's beauty. That's the Torah attitude towards womanly beauty. So why is the Torah praising womanly beauty when the same Torah is denigrating it? Not only that, Chazal say, Al tistakel bekankan, do not look at the vessel, but look at its contents. In English you say, don't judge a book by its cover. I hate to tell you this, by the way, I write books. The cover's very important. Very important. I hate to tell you they spend a lot more on the cover than they spend on the printing of the book itself. It's very important, but it's tragic. It shouldn't be that way. And we have statements as our sages that tell us that judging a book by its cover is wrong. A person should not be judged by their looks. On the contrary, it's problematic and deceptive and lies and vanity and falsehood. And there are plenty of statements in our literature that tell us that external beauty is misleading and problematic. What does the Gemara say about this? So there's a sugya in the Gemara, it's in the Darim, Daf Nun. There the Gemara talks about how you should approach external beauty. And let me tell you what the Gemara says. And this makes the problem extreme. The Gemara says there that there was one of the sages of the time, Mishnaic sage, Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, probably the greatest of his day, who was incredibly great as a sage of the Mishnah, but he happened to be extremely ugly. Extremely ugly. He was so distorted in his looks that people weren't even ashamed to talk about it when they met him. How come you're so ugly? Ironically, his ears were formed by the sound of Torah. The Mishnah says his mother used to wheel him into the yeshiva as a baby, that his ears should be formed by the sounds of Torah. And they were. He became great. But he was broken in his looks. So the Gemara says that he once had a conversation with a Roman woman. She was the daughter of the emperor or the governor of the Middle East, whatever high official he was. And she once met him, and she said, Rabbi, how could such beautiful wisdom be contained in such an ugly vessel? His wisdom was legendary. She understood it. She appreciated it. The Gemara is not talking about fools. She knew what his great wisdom meant. And yet she saw that his body was broken. She said to him, how could such beautiful wisdom, appreciated his wisdom, how could such beautiful wisdom be contained in such an ugly body? Before I tell you what he answered her, let's try to understand the question. First of all, this is the question of a woman. Woman, as we said, is the locus of beauty. Yosef's an exception. That needs discussion. But womanly beauty is the place of beauty. Why are women the ones who understand beauty? This is deeply related to something we call bina. There's no time now to go into that, but bina is a spiritual quality of knowing how to dispose things and organize them. And in the material world, it's a talent for beauty. And that's why women understand beauty. Men can be very organized, but not beautiful. If you've had the misfortune of spending years in a military camp, as I have, where only men are, it's extremely neat, but deathly. Let a woman loose for a couple of hours, it starts to look beautiful. So a woman is the one that understands beauty. And she's a woman, and she's a Roman woman. Now, Rome was the mighty empire that spread Greek culture around the world. If you know anything about Western culture, you know that it's Greek. It's not Roman. There was no Roman culture. Rome was simply the military empire that spread Greek culture around the world. And of course, you see that they did it very effectively. We're still today in the Greek culture. They won the war with them. No question with the Maccabees, the Hellenists. No question they won the war. We won in terms of survival. That was miraculous, our survival as a Jewish people with our values. But they won the war in terms of defining the culture of the world. Everything about the world around us is Greek. And I hate to tell you this, but your head is Greek. Your head is Greek. No matter how religious you think of yourself, your mind structures are Greek. Everything you know is Greek. The English language is derived from Greek through Latin. All of architecture, all of art, all of mathematics. Aristotle single-handedly founded all of science on his own. The Rambam calls him the highest person possible to get without prophecy. Aristotle began all of modern philosophy. All modern philosophy today is based on Greece. Any philosophical discussion goes back to Greek. The Rambam himself, in his famous philosophical work, begins with 26 propositions of Aristotle about God. All of politics is Greek today. Politics is a Greek word. Democracy is a Greek idea. Everything about the West is Greek. Everything you think about, your mind structure, all of Western culture, from the political to the economic, to the aesthetic. All sculpture today takes its origins from Greek perfection in proportion and sculpture. All architecture today. So Western culture is Greek, and Rome was the empire that propagated that. So she's a Greek woman. She has a Greek mind. And her mind is tuned to beautiful content and beautiful vessel. That's why the Greek games were played naked, as we said. Why were they naked? You can run faster when you're not wearing a thong. I run faster. It's because you were displaying the body. There were Jews who tried to uncircumcise themselves, so they could participate in the Greek games. The body is beautiful; it's a divine creation, and the mind is beautiful, and they raised both to perfection. You see the emphasis on the beauty of the definition of the body in Greek sculpture and art. So she comes from that legacy. By the way, there's an old debate in the art world: does a beautiful painting need a beautiful frame or a very simple frame? What shows a painting to its greatest advantage? Does a beautiful diamond need a very plain setting so it shows itself off? Or does it deserve an ornate setting to bring out its beauty? This interesting tension. But she's thinking along these lines, and she understands that great beauty needs a great vessel, and the two must be in harmony. It's a deep spiritual teaching and a deep aesthetic teaching. She says, Rabbi, how could you have such beautiful wisdom in such an ugly vessel? It's an affront and a contradiction to it. So he answered her as follows. He said, what does your father keep his wine in? The Caesar. She said, like everyone else, he keeps his wine in the clay. You know, they used glazed clay vessels. Amphora, they were called. Those are the wine vessels. So he said to her, surely your father, the king, The emperor, surely his wine should be in metal, in gold and silver vessels. She said, that's a good idea. She thought he was right. That's her aesthetic. She goes back to the palace in the wine cellar. She had his father's wine put all in gold and silver vessels. Now, when you put wine in metal vessels, it spoils. The metal interacts with the alcohol. It was all ruined. When they served the wine at the Caesar's table, it was all bad. So he said, what's going on? She said, the Jew told me to do it. So Caesar called him Shur ben Chan. He said, Rabbi, what's going on? Now listen to his answer. He said, I tried to show your daughter that when the vessel tried to make its own statement and comes into conflict with the content, it damages the content. The only way the wine can remain pure and unadulterated is when the vessel has no conflict or competition. It's only a vessel. When the vessel holds only, it doesn't damage the content. As soon as the vessel wants to make something of itself and is not loyal to its task of only being a vessel, it wants to make its own statement, then it comes into conflict with the content and it ruins the content. This is a very deep idea. The greatest human being who ever lived was the humblest. Because his vessel was totally transparent, Moshe Rabbeinu, his vessel was completely nullified, he could contain the most. No accident that. So I tried to show your daughter that when the vessel makes its own statement, then it conflicts with the content. In other words, I achieve great wisdom because of my ugliness. And by the way, you see this. If a little girl is very, very good looking, it's a big disadvantage. A big disadvantage. The prettier she is, the bigger disadvantage she has. She'll be admired and praised for her looks. No one will pay attention to her content. Her whole persona will go around her looks. It's a terrible tragedy for a girl to be extremely good looking. I know the Gemara says, Ein ish ela l'noi, you should marry a girl for good looks. There's two opinions. One is for children and one is for good looks. It's part of the problem. But be that as it may. Be that as it may. Imagine one of these modern celebrity type women who are known for their bodies. Imagine someone interviews her and she says something deeply philosophical. People would break down laughing. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not what you're here for. So he said to her, the reason that I achieved my wisdom is because I'm not good looking. That made it much easier for me, and that's how I achieved it. Now, she did not accept that answer. The Gemara not talking about idiots. She said, but Rabbi, I know rabbis who are extremely wise and very good looking. I don't accept your principle. Who is she thinking of? The Gemara said, Bishop Kohen Gadol, for example, he was so unbelievably, Shmuel, right? He was so unbelievably good looking, the Romans skinned his face to keep it. Or later, Rabbi Yochanan, for example, was called Mishapirid Yerushalayim, from the great beautiful ones of Yerushalayim. He was so beautiful. The Gemara said that you put him outside the mikveh, that women on their way home to their husband should first see him. Or once he went to visit a friend of his who was poverty-stricken in a dark house. Rabbi Yochanan rolled up his sleeve and lit the house with the incandescence of his beauty. Right? So she said, you tell me you need to be ugly to be wise? I know rabbis who are very good-looking and very wise. He said, Aval behi have a sunny have a gemirit. He said, had they been ugly, they would have been wiser. In other words, the thesis is, I achieved my good looks, my wisdom because of my problematic looks. Good looks are a disadvantage. You can achieve wisdom, but it's harder. That's the Gemara. What is this Gemara telling you? This is the definitive statement in our sages about physical beauty. This is the Gemara's teaching, lived in the flesh, by one of the great sages of the Mishnah, debating the Greeks on this point. And the conclusion is that looks and externalities are problematic, as you'd expect. We're looking for the internality. So we have a tremendous contradiction. Let me state the questions again. Question 1, the Torah emphasizes female beauty, and that's very problematic in itself. But worse, the Torah runs down that beauty as extremely problematic. Do we see the problem? Yes, no? Anyone who reads through Torah, even just at a superficial level, might be struck by this problem. It's an extreme problem. This bothered me for years. And on one occasion, I happened to be in Vilna. We were on a trip with Ramosha Shapira. And somebody asked him this question in the last 5 minutes of a shir, and he said something, just a couple of minutes, that opened up the whole thing. And let me tell you what the answer is. It's a long discussion, can only attack one angle of it. If you'd like to look this up, I wrote a book about it. It's called As Dawn Ends the Night. As Dawn Ends the Night. That's a recent book. That is a principle that he taught us that unlocks this particular problem and many, many others. Many others. It's a principle that the book is built on many sugyas that you can only understand, and this is one of them, by knowing the meaning of the transition from the hidden part of, the revealed part of Jewish history to the hidden part. As dawn ends the night. Chazal called this a dawn. Amazing statement. The Gemara says that Esther, Ma shachas soif kol halayla, that's the language of the Gemara. Just as dawn ends the entire night, Esther soif anisim. Esther ends the phase of miracles. That's the language. In other words, this phase of history is the phase of the miraculous. That's called Gilui Ponim. Hashem reveals himself. Prophecy and miracles always go together. As the Ralbag points out, no miracle ever occurred in Torah without a prophet being present. The Navi is always the agency of miracles, just like he's the agency of Hashem speaking. The reason for that is that you express yourself in the world in two ways. You talk and you act. You talk and you act. Hashem also speaks and acts. Direct speech of Hashem is called prophecy. Direct action of Hashem in the world is called miracles. Those are two open modes of revelation. In this phase of history until 2,350 years ago, Hashem revealed himself openly. Then miracles and prophecy ended. And we move into the phase for the last over 2,000 years. We've seen no revealed miracles and we've heard no words of prophecy. That is the watershed moment in history when everything changed. And understanding that transition is a key to many issues. When I went to Rav Moshe before he died, I told him I'm writing a book about this. I said, I've chosen, I said, you must have told us that there must be 20 different sugyas in Torah you can only understand if you understand this transition. He said, Esrim yesh matayim. There are 200. What do you mean 20? There are so many things in Torah you cannot begin to approach unless you know what happened at that transition from the revealed to the hidden. So you need to go through all those sugyas. You need to buy a copy of the book. If you really want to understand it well, you should buy 2 copies. Then all will be clear. But one of the sugyas in that book is the transition that explains this question about beauty. So let's try to attack that. But I must tell you, to have a full understanding of this subject, we're only looking at one application. You need to see all the others. For yeshiva people, the most important thing is to understand the nature of the transition from a written law to an oral law. That's the essence of the change. Until here, prophets are speaking. Nobody made up any Torah. You received it. Nobody ever said any of their own ideas. In the era of prophecy, we don't have any record of anybody saying a Torah Chiddush. You didn't say a Chiddush, it was all clear. For the first time on Sheikh Knesset, it says, Heim Amru Shleisha Dvarim. They of their own accord made up Torah. Now we move into a phase where we create Torah. That's the essence of the change. But with regard to beauty, there's also a major change, and it's a key. It's an example of this key. So let me try to express it. In order to do this, we need to go back in time. Let's go back to the origin of human beings and understand the nature of the human condition, and then we'll try to apply it to this particular subject. The nature of human existence, the story of human existence in the world, is the story of the battle between the body and the soul. Nothing moves in Torah without that understanding. We are a composite of body and soul, and it's the tension between the two that defines what we are as humans. Body and soul, content in vessel. Wine in a flask. That's what you are, as the Kabbalists call it, oires and kelim, lights and vessels. The light is the neshama inside the body. That's a faint glow on the face that disappears when a person dies. And it's in a vessel, an earthenware vessel. There are many, many parallels in Torah between the human body and a clay vessel. But that's the story. What is the relationship between body and soul? This duality, right? This woman's concern about a beautiful content in a beautiful vessel, pure wine in a pure vessel. That's the human story. We are body and soul together. That's what defines us as human. You are not your body for sure, and you're not your neshama. You're not your neshama. You're your neshama in a guf. Without a body, you're not a whole being. What's our concept of the final state of human existence? Tchias HaMeisim. Tchias HaMeisim means the soul in the body, again. We don't talk about a dispensable body that one day will disintegrate and be left behind and the soul will float free. That's not us. There are religions that talk that way, but not us. Our final version of human existence is the soul in the body. Tchias HaMeisim, where the body itself will be resurrected. By the way, we experience a premonition of this on Shabbos. Shabbos is Me'en Olam Haba. What did we do on Shabbos? Rashi says, eat more. Eat more. On Shabbos we feed the body more, because the neshama can experience more body on Shabbos. Shabbos is Me'en Olam Haba. What you do on Shabbos is feel physical oned, physical pleasure. Shabbos isn't a free-floating time when you leave the body behind. Yom Kippur is a practicing for that. But it's nothing compared to Shabbos. Shabbos is a time when you put the two together. Body and soul, that's the human condition. Free will, by the way, which defines you as human, is only in the tension between body and soul. The soul has no free will at all. Never would make a mistake if you're only a soul. The body couldn't do anything without a soul. It's in the electric tension between body pulling down and neshama pulling up, what we call Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Ra. The body pulling downwards towards the material, the lecherous, the animal and the sensual, and the body, the soul pulling up towards the conscience and the spiritual, the angelic. In that electric tension between the two, that's where you exist. The Gemara in Perek Chelek says that Rabbi, let's put it in Greek terms. Rabbi and Antoninus were once debating. Rabbi, the Jewish view, the great editor of the Mishnah, and Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman, again, read Greek, right? Greek-Roman philosopher, very great man. They were debating one day. So the Antoninus said to Rabbi, I will show you how after death you will exempt yourself from all punishment. I will show you that after death, God will not be able to punish you. Why? Because death means that body and soul are separated. Body lying inanimate in the grave, the soul floating in the air like a bird. By the way, this is the Greek view, a duality. We never accept the separation. The great Kabbalist, the Leshem, says even in death there's some soul in body. It's called the Havla Degarmi. We never accept a total duality. The Ramchal says in the worst times in your life there's always some Kedusha. And he explains why. And the worst times of history as well. But be that as it may, his view is a dichotomy, a split between the two, as we'll try to understand more deeply. So death is a body lying inanimate and a soul floating free. How will God punish you? God will come to the soul, then he'll try to punish the soul. The soul will say, God, I'm floating there like a bird. If it wasn't for the body, I never could have sinned. God will then try and punish the body. The body will say, what do you want from me? I'm a lump of clay. Had it not been for the animating power of the soul, I never could have sinned. So each will blame the other correctly, and God won't be able to punish you. So Rabbi said, here, I'll explain where you're wrong. Listen to what Rabbi answered him. He said, there was once a king who had a beautiful orchard of figs, and he employed 2 guards to guard the orchard. 2 men, one of whom was lame and one of whom was blind. The king left the 2 guards in the orchard, and these 2 men decided to steal all the figs. So the lame man climbed on the shoulders of the blind man, and using his ability to walk and his ability to see, they ate all the figs. When they were lying under the tree stuffed full of figs, the king arrived and saw all this fig stolen. So the king took a stick and started to beat the lame man. When the lame man said to the king, look, your majesty, I can't walk. Had it not been for his legs, we never could have done this. So the king went to the blind man, about to beat him. The blind man says, look, I can't see. Had it not been for him, we never could have done this. What did the king do? He picked up the lame man, put him back on the shoulders of the blind man and beat them together. You perpetrated the sin as a team, that's where your recompense is given. Meaning, you functioned in the world, you did mitzvahs and averus in the world as a composite tension between body and soul. That's what will have to be reconstituted. They're both part of the work. They're both essential. According to Kabbalah, the body comes from a higher place than the soul. According to Kabbalah, the body is an emanation of a first light, which is higher. But be that as it may, body and soul exist together. And that's what defines you as human. So to understand what a human being is, you have to understand the body fully and the soul fully. If you'd like to look this up in secular philosophy, there was a professor of philosophy at Cambridge called Bernard Williams, very interesting man, died about 2 or 3 years ago. He wrote a book called Problems of the Self. And there he grapples with a philosopher's approach to what defines the self. Is it the body or is it the mind? The conclusion is you need both, amazingly. You need both. But be that as it may. So let's follow the history of body and soul. Let's go back to the beginning. When Adam was created, Adam and Chava, the body was such a perfect vessel for the soul that it existed naked. The Torah makes a point of telling you that they existed naked and shame was not possible. The Rambam says it doesn't mean they weren't ashamed. It means they couldn't have been ashamed. The Rambam says if you walked up to Adam and said to him, aren't you ashamed I can see your body? It's like walking up to you and saying, aren't you ashamed I can see your hand? You'd think, what are you talking about? Try to be ashamed of your hand. Adam couldn't be ashamed of his body. He couldn't if he tried. Why? Because the body was such a perfect vessel for the soul that all it did was demonstrate the soul. You looked at the body, you saw the neshama. You didn't see the body. Rav Dessler says it was like looking at a 1,000-watt electric bulb. All you can see is the light. If you look very carefully, you can make out the wispy outlines of the glass. The body was completely illuminating. You looked at the body, you saw the neshama. You wouldn't put clothes on a body like that. Listen to how the Gemara puts it. The Gemara says that before the sin of Adam, they were clothed in kosnos or. They wore garments of light, Aleph Vav Resh. After the sin, Hashem clothed them in garments of Ayin Vav Resh, or. You know, in Hebrew, Lashon Kodesh, there's a principle that if you spell a word with an aleph and then spell it with an ayin, you'll see a transition from spiritual to material. Fascinating exercise. Do this at home. Afar, Efer, ayin, ayin. Ayin with an aleph means is not seen. Ayin, ne'elam, you cannot see it. Ayin with an ayin means the organ that does bring to revelation. The same word in Hebrew means a wellspring, where the water becomes revealed. Amazing exercise. Aleph vav resh and ayin vav resh. Aleph vav resh means light. The medium of revelation. They were clothed in garments of light, meaning you looked at the outside, you saw the inside. After the sin, when man cast that relationship into its obverse, where the body now no longer demonstrates the neshama, the body unfortunately demonstrates the body. So now Hashem, what did man do when he realized that his body is now making the statement? He covered himself with the leaves. Hashem said, I'll teach you a lesson for all of history. Whenever you have a problem, try to make the problem the solution. Don't use garments to hide your nakedness. Use them to reveal your dignity. And he sewed them beautiful garments. When a king wears royal garments, they hide the king, but they reveal his royalty. That's the solution. It's not as good as having a naked body that shows the neshama. But in the fallen state, that's what you need to do. So listen to this. First they were clothed in garments of light, aleph vav resh. After the sin, they became clothed in garments of ayin vav resh, which means or, which means skin. But if you know a little Hebrew, you know the word ayin vav resh in Hebrew spells iver, which means blind. So first they were clothed in a medium that revealed. Now they, by the way, in English, this is called a thick hide. The human skin is called a hide. Where did that come from? Because first it was a reveal. The Medrash says Adam was clothed in garments of, like this, like your nail. Ask the doctor there. When he examines a patient, the first thing he looks at is the nails beds. You can see the color of the blood. If you're very clever, you can see even the heartbeat sometimes. Transparent. Now we have only a little bit left, where the neshama leaves when you sleep and comes back in the morning, but the rest is hide. So the body now, instead of showing the neshama, shows the body. That's terrible. Now you need to do something about that. So garments, by the way. Why are you ashamed when you're naked? Let's understand this. In all cultures, by the way. I am an African. Even in the most so-called primitive African tribes, they wear some garment, some part of the body is covered. I assure you it's not because it's cold. Where's this nakedness? Where's the shame come from? The reason you feel ashamed always, shame is always caused by discrepancy. Incommensurate states causes shame. When you fail, if you fail at something that you could not have succeeded, you don't feel ashamed, you just feel like a failure. But if you could have and didn't, you feel ashamed. If you should have and didn't, if you function below your own standards, where there's incommensurate meeting of what you could have and should have done and didn't do, that's when you get ashamed. The reason you feel ashamed when you're naked, you're aware that you have an angelic inner being and you're housed in an animal. You know that inwardly you're an angel. And your body looks like an orangutan. I mean, some of us more, some of us less, but that's why you're ashamed. It's the discrepancy between the states. What's the solution? You cover the money. In Hebrew, the word for a garment is levush. Levush spells lobosh. Not to be ashamed. The other word for a garment in Hebrew is beged. Beged means treachery. Beged means a garment, it means a traitor. In Old English, in the 18th century, the word for a traitor in English was a turncoat. Beged means treachery. Because now you don't see the reality, you see the external. By the way, according to Kabbalah, Aleph is the letter of Kedusha, the letter of the Neshama. It's a silent letter. The next three letters, as they're created in the Aleph base, are Beis Gimel Dalet Beged. First is the letter of the soul. The next three elements that are created are the elements that form the position, the context, the housing for the neshama. So clothing is the problem. But it's the solution as well, of course. And so man was created originally. When you looked at the body, you saw the neshama. You wouldn't put clothes on a body like that. But after the sin, when now all you see is the body, and you can't see the neshama at all, how do you see a neshama now? Now you look at a human being. Instead of seeing the neshama, you see only the body. How much soul do you see? A faint glow on the face. That's called ziv aponim. If you're a Moshe Rabbeinu, it shines out so brightly, you look like Adam Arisha, and you have to cover it. People couldn't stand to look at it. Why the face, by the way? Because the face is the last part of the body that is still some... In Hebrew, the word panim, which means external face, is exactly the same word as panim, which means inside. Hebrew is enough to make you frum overnight. Understand Lashon Kodesh? If you're in Kiruv, all you need to do is explain Hebrew. It's enough. You don't need anything more than that. The linguists are driven bananas by Hebrew. How did that evolve by accident? The panim and the eyes, of course, ma'ayan, the eyes, the place where the hidden well springs are visible. That's why you need no garments for the face. There's no shame in the face. The body needs shame. The face has no shame. Because some of the light of the original neshama, very little, if you've had the misfortune of watching people die, as I've had to, you'll see a moment before death and a moment after there's a change. A light is extinguished, but it's very faint. It's very faint. The opposite. Rav Dessler says, when you looked at Adam Rishon, all you saw was the neshama. When you looked at him after the chet, all you saw was the body. You know, Torah always has parallel dimensions. Halachic, Kabbalistic, Mussar, philosophical, hashkafic, they're all parallel. The Kabbalists explain that first the body shone and now it hides. How did the Balei Mussar put it? Listen to Rav Dessler. Again, these are all parallel. You need to have your Torah organized in these parallel lines, always. Rav Dessler puts it like this. He says, before the chet of Adam Rishon, his consciousness of self was only spiritual. When he thought, I, me, I, it was only the neshama speaking. Where was the body speaking from? Second person at a distance. As a serpent, would you like to taste the taste of sin? Completely external to his consciousness. First person, me, I, was only spirit. The body, the lecherous material animal body spoke externally from a distance. After the chet, says Rav Dessler, your consciousness becomes totally body. When you say I, you mean your body only. I know it's humiliating, but I can prove it to you. Imagine you have something delicious that you'd like to taste, especially when you shouldn't. Which voice speaks? I'd like to taste that. I'd like to taste that. And how does your conscience address you? You know, you shouldn't. Very embarrassing. But our consciousness of self. The Gemara puts it like this. The Gemara says that the body is hijacked the neshama. How does the Gemara put it? It says that the Yetzer Hara, the body speaking, is first like a passerby in the street. Then he's like a beggar at the door. Then he's like a guest in your home. And then if you remain lucky, you may remain a guest. How did Moshe Shapiro put it? He said this. He said, what's the right way to rob a bank? You have to imagine him saying this, but... You walk in with a motorcycle helmet and a gun, that's not for a Jewish boy. The right way to rob a bank, you make an appointment with the manager, you walk into his room, you lock the door behind you, you put a sock in his mouth, you tie him up, you lock him up in the closet, you sit at his desk and you run the bank. That's the sensible way to rob a bank. That's what's been done to you by the Yetzer. When you say I, it's him. You know, there's an amazing... The Gemara in Sukkah, in the fifth parak in Sukkah, the Gemara has a long sugya on the Yetzer Hara. The Gemara says the Yetzer Hara has many names. One of his names is Tzfoni, the hidden one. Why? Because it's Safun B'Lev Adam, he's hidden within the human heart. When I learned that Gemara at first, I thought this for sure is a misprint. This for sure. And we learned it together, I think. It was in Nashikon, we learned Sukkah, didn't we, in the beginning? Anyway, I was there. Sukkah, the Gemara says, the Yetzer Hara is hidden within the heart. When I learned that Gemara, I thought, this for sure, this is a misprint. What do you mean, my Yetzer is not hidden? What are Chazal telling me the Yetzer is hidden? Mine's not hidden. My Yetzer speaks to me all the time, loud and clear. The first thing I hear in the morning when I open my eyes, he says to me, Tatz, you know how cold it is out there? You know how tired you are? He speaks loud and clear. Chazal are telling me that the Yetzer is hidden within you. What do you mean? Mine is completely revealed. I had to say, I have to admit. Said Rav Moshe, you know how badly he's hidden? The one who thinks he knows where he is him. The one saying, my Yetzer, me, it's him speaking. The entire consciousness is him. Where's the real Yetzer Tov? Locked up in a closet someplace going, Ne'ilah maybe. Anyway, so here's the human situation. Originally, the body was the perfect vessel for the neshama. You looked at the body, you saw the neshama. Nakedness was perfect. That's exactly what was necessary. The only way you could see the neshama was because there was a vessel that brought it to consciousness. But as human history progressed, the first crash was the chet. That crashed the body into the obverse where the body now needs to be covered. And as history progresses, the problem becomes worse and worse and worse. And as we move through history, in those original generations of Avram and Sarah, for example, they were still able to hark back to the original condition. Sarah Imenu was a little bit, the Gemara says her beauty was a reflection of Eve's. Eve before the sin. You looked at Sarah, if you had any eyes. Let me give you an example. Rashi brings that one of Sarah's names was Yiska. Rashi says, because everybody could see through her beauty. What does it mean to see through a woman's beauty? What does it mean to see through a woman's beauty? The word soche in Hebrew, there's many words for seeing in Hebrew. Ro'eh, mabit, mistakel, sofeh, shur, many words for seeing in Hebrew. One of the words in Hebrew for seeing is soche. Soche means to see through. For example, the word sukkah is the same word. A sukkah should be transparent. At least the rain should come through, if not see the stars. A sukkah, in essence, is something you should see through. Soche means to see through. What does it mean to see through a woman's beauty? It means that Sarah Imenu carried her beauty stunning, ravishing beauty that could lead men to kill. But if you had any spiritual sensitivity and you looked at her, instead of seeing a woman in that provocative fashion, you thought of Hashem. That's called sneers. That's called sneers. It doesn't mean she hid her beauty. It means she projected her beauty in the world with such a refinement and such a dignity that the same provocative beauty that could bring Egyptian eyes down could bring the gaze up. That's called sneers. Sneers doesn't mean make yourself looking ugly. Some ladies think sneers means making yourself look like something the cat dragged in. That's not sneers, that's just ugly. Sneers means that you reflect a spiritual beauty in the world, a dignity and a refinement. And that's why sneers is a deep, deep thing. It's not just the length of a skirt or a sleeve. It's a deportment and a way of speaking. It's a perfume as well. Some ladies walk into the room, half the men fall over anesthetized. That's not sneers either. Yiska calls sochin beyofya. If you're an Egyptian, there's no hope for you. You look at anything that way and strip it naked. But if you have any eyes to see, you looked at Sarah Imani, you looked at her, you saw Hashem, that's called sneers. So these early generations were able to do that. And as we move further and further in history, it becomes more difficult. And finally you get to Esther. Esther lives on the cusp of a world that is going dark. What is Esther? What is Purim? Esther means the hidden one. According to Kabbalah, you're moving from the male to the female. The male begins the pregnancy by giving a seed, that's all, then he disappears. The rest is all female. Till the final birth in danger and difficulty and Chevlei Mashiach, which is a womanly time of birth. Esther introduces that. Esther means the hidden one. Purim means the luck of the draw. It isn't even a Hebrew word. The Megillah doesn't mention Hashem's name. Every place you touch Purim, Hashem is going into hiding. There's a machlokes in the Gemara whether Purim belongs in Tanakh or not. Was it Nevuah, only Ruach HaKodesh? Doubtful. It brings rayas that there was Nevuah involved. Okay, but borderline. Megillah. Megillah means to roll up and close, and Megaleh means to reveal. Purim has a miracle, but it's a hidden miracle. The king couldn't sleep. Haman arrived at the same time. Where's the miracle? No dead people being revived, no sea splitting. Hashem's going into hiding. And then finally, 150 years later, it's Chanukah. There's nothing at all. Nothing. There's no book at all, not even a Mishnah. Nothing in Chanukah. Nothing. No Nevi'im. Nothing. The only thing Chanukah is the last wave goodbye, a little flicker of a miracle. Like the miracles of Mishnah and Gemara, which are nothing compared to the miracles of Tanakh. That needs another explanation. The Baal HaLeshem asks, how come there were miracles in the Gemara? That's for another time, maybe. But Chanukah is the last time. After that, there's nothing. By the way, what was the... Listen to this amazing thing. You want an insight into Chanukah? Rav Hutner calls Chanukah the Yom Tov of Torah Shebaal Peh.
Today's your day.
Is it your day today? Oh, good day. So Rav Hutner says, Chanukah is the Yom Tov of Torah Shebaal Peh. Because here Torah Shebaal Peh began. Until now you had something. You could refer to something revealed. For the first time in Chanukah, people had to make up Torah themselves. What was the first rabbinic decision? Listen to this amazing thing. What was the first rabbinic decision made with no reference to Nevuah or any Gilui? Matisyahu. Chanukah. There's no more revelation in the world at all. So one day he gets up and he says, gentlemen, he's the leading rabbi of the age. I've made a decision, halachic decision. Rabbi, what's your decision? We declare war on the Greek Empire. Rabbi, you and whose army? Well, there's me and my 5 sons, we can muster about 13 people. I think we can do it. Rabbi, did you ask the prophets? No, none of them. Did you go to the Beis HaMikdash and read the Urim V'Tumim? I haven't seen them for a long time. Rabbi, what makes you think this is the right decision? It's Das Torah. I think this is the right thing. Declare war on the Greek Empire. They got 10,000 war elephants. Yep, I think it's the right thing to do. And they won. The first time a rabbi made a decision with no reference to a Navi, no Urim V'Tumim, no help from above, just of his own, what the Ramban calls Ruach HaKodesh Shebekirban, is a decision to declare war on the Greek Empire. That's what led us, not, smell new spices on Motzei Shabbos, plat the challah is a little different, declare war. That's the chutzpah. It's called chutzpah. The azas de kedusha. That's called the chutzpah of Torah Shebaal Peh. Anyway, at this point in time, there comes a woman, Esther, and now beauty is debatable. Up to that time, if you carried the beauty correctly, if you had any eyes to see, Rabbi Yochanan harks back to the beauty of the previous age. Shapir Yerushalayim, the Torah Yerushalmi is a higher Talmud than the Bavli. Bavli is a hidden one. Yerushalmi still reveals something in the Bavli. Yochanan could still show that beauty. Bavli is completely in the broken down world. How do we learn Bavli? How do you learn Talmud Bavli? Only from taking wrong things. Bavli, Havaminas. There's no truth in Bavli at all. It's all wrong. when you learn Gemara. The only way you extract what's right is by rubbing together the broken pieces. The world's broken. Talmud Bavli. Bavel means broken language. Have a navla. Let us go down there and babble up their language. Jerusalem Talmud's not like that. It shows in the Talmud Yerushalmi, like the Zohar, when they want you to understand something, it says Ta Chazi, come and see, I'll show you. In Bavli it's Ta Shma, you have to hear it. It's in the darkness. No longer can you see it. Now I have to hear it. How do you hear it? I'll take a wrong idea, I'll break that down, I'll get something better, then I'll show you that's wrong, we extract the truth from broken pieces. Because we're in a dark and hidden world, through broken vessels. That's how we see it. And therefore Esther, on the one hand, one opinion is, she harks back to a time where the original beauty exists. The other opinion is too late for that. She needs to be 75 years old with a green face. Only when the body's broken, and Rabbi ben Chananya is deep in the face of Torah Shebaal Peh, where you need a broken body, because any revelation of the body will damage, will conflict with the content. The further history progresses, the worse the problem if you're good looking. The more likely you are to be distracted by the externality. Shlomo Melech, King Solomon. Let's finish with this maybe. Shlomo Melech is Torah, but Shlomo Melech is all introducing Torah Shebaal Peh. The root of Torah, again, it's a great art to understand where in Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shebaal Peh begins. There are many sources. Sefer Yeshua, for example, is the beginning of Torah Shebaal Peh. Sefer Dvorim, if you want to go back further. Dvorim is the beginning of the first 4 books are Hashem speaking. The 5th book is the Makabel. Moshe Rabbeinu repeating it from his point of view. The Gaon of Vilna points out that's why Sefer Dvorim is completely different in style than the first 4 books. The first 4 books are Hashem speaking. The 5th book is Moshe Rabbeinu speaking. Completely different style. Completely different. But one of the definitive sources in Torah Shebiksav for Torah Shebaal Peh is Shlomo Melech. Shlomo is the Oisias HaMashal. A mashal always is something that teaches you about something else from the outside. He wrote Mishlei. What do you want in that? Mishlei means I'll teach you something by telling you something else outside for you to get back to the inside. Like the broken pieces of Avram is to get you back. He wrote Shir HaShirim. Why do I talk about a mashal? It was such a dangerous and extreme mashal, they wanted to ban it. Not even put it in. He's talking about physical beauty and love and sensuality to talk about the spirit. Shlomo is Osias Lim Moshe, or Hamashal. All of his writings. Right? When he says Shekarei Chanev Aliyefi, that's what he's teaching you. He's showing you the source in Torah, what is going to become a problem. As history progresses, he's warning you about it, introducing that phase. Anyway, what we studied today is the beginning of the theme of this contradiction. Originally, the Torah praises beauty. Of course, it's of essence. Sarah's body was like the body of Chava Imenu that was naked in the world and showed you Hashem. The Gemara says in Baba Basra that after the Chet, Rabbi was able to go and look at he went into the Machpelah and he wasn't allowed to look at Adam and Chava, but he was allowed to look at the heels of Adam Rishon. And he said that the heels of Adam, dead after the Chet, the heels shone more light than the sun. In Kabbalah it's written that Adam Rishon occupied the whole expanse of the universe. The Malachim looked at him, they couldn't tell the difference between him and Hashem. A body like that doesn't need clothing, that's a body that shows. And Greece is exactly where the problem arose. The Greeks said the body's beautiful. We have to show the body. In essence, they're right, but it's the wrong phase of history. Now you look at a naked body, you don't see the neshama anymore. That's the problem. They're harking back to something that has a truth in it. The body is exquisitely beautiful, but it needs to be very carefully handled now. Very carefully handled. Snis is not a natural thing. The body should be revealed. But a body that reveals the neshama should be revealed. Now the body reveals the body, that's the problem. A body that's similar to the animal, that contains excrement, problematic. Contradiction to the neshama. Anyway, this is introduction to the subject. There are many other aspects that the subject touches on, but that's the beginning. The beginning is that originally the Torah is talking about physical beauty because the two are in harmony. And let me finish with this, our unique role in history is to unite those two again. It has to be delicately done with the body very delicately handled, but our goal is to unite the two. The non-Jewish world never did that. What was the non-Jewish world's response when the situation broke down? Originally, what did they teach? They said the body's hopeless now. You'll never engage the body without bringing the neshama down. So they taught religion that floats above, all non-Jewish religions. All non-Jewish religions. Shem and Eva were teaching that sort of Torah. You float above the world. You can't engage the body, it will bring you down. If you're a Christian, you're fraught with guilt about marital intimacy and the body. If you're a Christian, you want to be holy, you have to become a monk or a nun. Muslims not allowed to even own alcohol. All Eastern religions follow a ascetic path, a transcendent path. They're not fools. They know the body's very dangerous. We teach that the body has to be re-engaged. Avram Avinu didn't come to teach Torah in the world. I hate to tell you this. He did not teach Torah. Shem and Eva were teaching it long before him. He didn't come to teach Torah in the world. He didn't come to teach monotheism in the world. They hadn't forgotten about Hashem. He lived in the same generation as Noach. I promise you nobody had forgotten about God then. Shem and Eva were teaching Torah. Good enough for Yaakov Avinu to learn there. He didn't teach them Torah. He taught them mitzvah. Avram is 248 mitzvahs. He taught them that you use the body to express Kedusha. That was wild. No non-Jew ever grasped that. What do you mean use the body to show? You use the body, it'll bring the neshama down. All the Mefarshim say that's why a goy can bring a korban, but only an oila. A goy, a non-Jew can bring a korban, a sacrifice in the Beis Hamikdash. Only an oila. An oila is the one that's burnt completely to Hashem. You tell a goy, you bring a sacrifice to Hashem, you share it with God. He eats half, you eat half. They think you're total sacrilege. What are you talking about? And that's exactly what we do. Ours is exactly that Kedusha. The greatest holiness in Judaism is called bris milah. They think that's ridiculous. In their culture, it's the subject of curses and swearing and vulgarity. In our religion, it's called Kedusha. In Hasidus, the teaching is that the more problematic the body, the higher the Kedusha. The deepest and darkest recesses of history and the most potentially fallen and sensual, and that's where you get the most Kedusha in the world. That's uniquely Jewish. Let me finish with this, I promise you. The Gemara says like this. The Medrash says, Avram Avinu, if this doesn't move you, there's no hope for you. If you don't respond to this, you're not Jewish. Avram and Sarah are traveling from Israel to Egypt. This is us, our father and mother. As they cross the border from Eretz Yisrael to Mitzrayim, read, from the zone of marital purity to the zone of marital contamination. Eretz Yisrael is so pure that it hates immorality. Egypt is the place that is called the cesspool of the world, Erev Asar, it's the nakedness of the world, where they'll kill a man for his wife's beauty. As they transition from that Kedusha to that Tumah, he turns to his wife and he says, please tell them you're my sister. What does that mean? The Torah is never talking simple practical strategy. The deep message is, when it comes to marital sanctity, every man should think of his wife as his sister. What is a brother and sister? They're two separate people who have a common origin. What are husband and wife? They're two separate people who are fused in the spiritual world. The Gemara says husband and wife are fused in the world of Kedusha. They're torn apart, that's called the Nesirah. They're brought to the world as two separate people, have to find each other and mesh together through their own efforts. Every husband and wife are indeed a brother-sister. Ach in Hebrew means to stitch something torn that was once one. La'acheh. La'acheh ichui means you take a garment that's torn and you stitch it back together. It's called la'acheh. It was once one and torn, you stitch it back together. Brother and sister are two separate people who have a unique bond because they were once one in the generation of the parents. Husband and wife have a unique bond because they were once one in the previous world. The Maharal points out that the original marriages in the world were only between brother and sister. Adam and Chava had children, they were brothers and sisters. Olam chesed yiboneh. Married mother, but there was no better marriage than a brother marrying a sister in that generation. What could be better? So the Medrash says, in Shir HaShirim it says, Achai Slani Katana, we have a young sister. Says the Medrash, who's our young sister? Avram Avinu. Who's our young sister, the Jewish people's young sister? Avram. She'iche Sakera. He came upon a torn world and stitched it back together. Abraham walked the earth at a time when humankind was teaching spirit and body are separated. Too damaged. The sin of Adam has cast the world into material sensuality. And the soul must fly above. If you try to put the soul into the body, it will rapidly bring the soul down. And he came along and he said, we cannot tolerate a torn world. We need to engage the body and lift it up. They said, you're crazy. The soul could never lift the body. It will only bring the soul down. He said, we have to do it. And so he developed a thing called brought to the world mitzvah. Mitzvah means a joining. But savtachada means a bond. Mitzvah means a physical action. Almost every mitzvah, a physical action, which expresses Kedusha. That's a restitching together a torn world that's completely unique about us. Nobody took that option. The rest of the world taught you got to separate the two completely. But that's our goal is to get the body once again to shine with the light of the Neshama. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to do it to such an intense degree you couldn't bear to look at him. And each of us, we're supposed to achieve at least a little bit of that. Chochmas Adam Tari Ponav, the wisdom of a person who has learned a lot of Torah, his face should shine. Of course, you have to have eyes to see it. But somebody who's learned Torah, his face should have a certain glow. There should be something arresting about that face. Anyway, this is the beginning of the theme. Chanukah is the showdown between a worldview and ours. And here's where the battle's pitched. Thank you very much.